Okay, welcome back to Virginia Free Interviews the Candidates. Joining us now from the 89th District in the city of Norfolk, Joe Dillard Jr. Joe, welcome aboard. Introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for the House of Delegates.
Thank you, Delegate Saxman. My name is Joe Dillard. I'm running for the open Democratic nomination for the House of Delegates 89th District. Uh, my desire to run is pretty cut and simple because I never desired to hold any political office as I was raised. But after joining different organizations and advocating for certain rights, working in Richmond for a few years on the other side of lobbying for special interest for public transportation, I decided that I could best be a servant to my community of getting up there and trying to help change and shape policy in this Dillard rural Commonwealth.
Okay, well you've cut right to the chase on a couple issues there. You're talking about transit. You did some lobbying. What was the nature
Yes,
of
sir.
your lobbying for the
I
quote
was
unquote special interest?
Well, I wouldn't even say special interest because I work for Hampton Roads Transit.
Well, you mentioned it.
You being a former delegate, public transit is really not a special interest. 1% of our ridership is choice ridership, was that directly translates to pockets of poverty and our ridership. But I do work for Hampton Roads Transit. I was the government affairs liaison before I threw my
Okay.
head to run for office. So I dealt with a lot of the legislators on both sides of the aisle, from Republicans of Delegate Villanueva being the transportation chair to Democrats when Kenneth Alexander was up there in the Senate to make sure we got some policy through and supporting public transportation uh, in my region because we serve 6 of the 10 largest cities in Hampton Road. I mean, in the
Right.
Commonwealth. So it gave me that great experience, Delegate Saxon, because going to Richmond is a total different thing than reading about being a House of Delegate member, because I always had the dream of, hey, maybe some type of council seat. But after getting into Richmond and seeing how the sausage is made, I saw I could make a greater impact, or believe I could make a greater impact with my age and the longevity and seniority needed in the House of Delegates to really get some things going.
Okay, well, let's. What did you see in Richmond? A lot of people, when they first get there, or have this notion of what the state government's like, state legislatures like. What did you learn about our Virginia government?
Well, what I learned is if we can, legislators, those working as legislative aides, lobbyists, if we can drown out and not pay attention to the news, we can actually get a lot of things done. As a millennial, and I'm proud to say it, when I got to Richmond, Delegate Saxman, I always thought that I was going to get there and I was going to have this omnibus bill, and everything in this bill that I wanted was going to come to fruition. I quickly learned that uh, the way bipartisanship, or the way Virginia is growing, is everybody gets a little piece of something,
Hmm.
and that's a great for the greater good of Virginia moving forward. So when I first got there, I heard stories of these omnibus bills and everybody wanting what what they wanted totally, and not piecemeal. But as time went on, I saw how in a bipartisan effort, even with the House of Delegates being controlled by the Republicans, uh, the effort to move forward and everybody getting a little bit of something to take back to the community, and that's what really got me engaged. Whereas it wasn't more so the partisan politics that we read about, because yeah, we have 3 or 4 issues as Republicans, Democrats don't come together on. But that's 3 or 4 issues of 3,000 to 4,000 bills that we look at every year. So we do get a lot of great things done through Richmond, and that's what kind of got me on the hook to want to get there.
So that's sort of one for the team, if you will. A lot of times people run at state government or run at the federal government, saying we got to get there and fix things. Nothing's getting done. Cha cha cha. But you really saw things getting done, and you want to be a part of that. That's certainly commendable.
Correct,
Tell
correct,
us about you brought up the Dillon rule, and
right.
the business community is one of those entities that looks at Dillon rule and says, whoa, 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 don't touch that. That's important.
But
So,
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the Dillon rule. I think it is important. I think it keeps Virginia unique. I don't think we have the capacity to do a home rule type style uh, shaping of Virginia. I can't speak for Richmond or Northern Virginia. I'm 100% behind regionalism.
okay.
I think Hampton Roads is moving there, but we're not there yet, Delegate Saxman. In
Yeah.
order for us to get there, we go to home rule. I think in my region, it'll be the Wild Wild West. So I am supportive of the Dillon.
Well, you've got a lot of localities in that region. You can imagine.
Exactly, exactly.
They
We
can't
have
get along
17
now.
localities. Exactly. So, and
Imagine
we
if they
make
get
it
a
the
lot more
home
power.
rule. Exactly. I am a supporter of the Dillon rule. I think it keeps things in order, at least for now. But some of the things that I'll be advocating for, number one, education. I don't know, but I haven't told you guys yet. I'm a graduate from Granby High School in Norfolk, which just so happens to be in the 89th district. I went to Northside Middle School, which was also a stone throw away from the district in Camp Allen. So I'm a product of Norfolk Public Schools. Right now, we have about 30,000 students in Norfolk. Um, as a product of Norfolk Public Schools, I have a unique background. Right now, 66% of our students are on free reduced lunch. Delegate Saxman, as you being a
Wow.
delegate, you know that directly correlates to how our poverty situation is. I was actually a student of free or reduced lunch. So when I tell you that I had no desires of becoming a delegate or even sitting here talking to you guys as Virginia Free and telling you what I plan on doing as a delegate, it was never in my repertoire. I was a football player. Uh, I was raised into a rough environment that was a pocket of poverty. And my teacher saw something different in me. When I say this has been a great ride of running for office, I mean it in every sense of the word, Delegate Saxman. My first grade and second grade teachers have yard signs with my name on it in their yard. So when I talk about education, we're talking about in Hampton Roads, well, not just Hampton Roads in Norfolk, we spend about $11,000 per pupil for our students compared to 13 or 14,000 in Northern Virginia. We need to become more competitive. Uh, I know Brian Stevens, the president of the Chamber, Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, and I think he shares the same vision of education will drive business into our economy, into our region. We just got ADP in downtown Norfolk. We have a new outlet coming out, outlet mall, and these are larger businesses. But in the 89th particularly, we need to focus on small business as well and how we can attract that and keep them going. And one of my things that I know we're going to be probably talking about is my desire to move minimum wage to $15 an hour. As I said on the Mayor's Commission of Poverty in Norfolk maybe 3 years ago, we had to somewhat, that's when Paul Crane was the mayor, we moved our minimum wage. We had people that been working for 20 years that weren't even making a living wage in the city of Norfolk. However, we were addressing pockets of poverty. So we made sure everyone that worked for the city had raised their wages to livable wages. Now, I know how the inflation will kick back, and I think it should be done over a sunset over a certain period of time. But I do believe it's time for Virginia to step up to the plate and try to increase the minimum wage.
Well, you're the one that brought it up, not me. What's and I always caution candidates, be careful.
I know I talked about it on Facebook, so I said let me bring it up before he brings it up.
No. I typically don't do that. In these interviews, we're just trying to get a feel for who the candidates are and what issues are important to them. And you've offered up, transit, Dillard rule, and now we're just going to charge right into minimum wage. I was going to stick with K-12, higher education, healthcare.
Go back to K-12. Let's get the hard
we did that. We did
go
that.
back to K-12.
Well, we'll come back to minimum wage. Trust me. Let's stick in education, so we don't bounce around too much here. Let's just go to higher education. Talk to me. What are your thoughts on higher education? How do you make it more affordable and more accessible?
Well, there's no strange. I don't think this goes without saying. I graduated college in 2012, Norfolk State University in political science. I went from there, Delegate Saxman, to get my master's, which I haven't completed my thesis yet, which is pending, in urban affairs. I went to the UVA Sources Institute for Political and Emerging Leaders program, which is about a $3,000 program. So when I say that I'm eye level in debt right now, currently, I'm eye level in debt. Sally Mae and that we're very good acquaintances, and I think that we need to go ahead and move towards. And I know Tom Perriello said it about vocational schools being not vocational schools, 2-year degrees or associate's degrees should be community college free. And I need to do research on how that will be paid for. But one thing I did like was seeing that in New York City, they actually made tuition free as long as you stayed in New York City after you got your degree. Now, I know that Virginia is number one when it comes to higher education. So these aren't like standards that we have to set as far as the, our educational attainment, but the way we pay for it, I think we need to go ahead and get back to the chopping block and put more value in our vocational schools. Everybody right now thinks that college is the only thing. 4-year traditional universities are the way of the future. I'm in Hampton Roads. We have a lot of vocational trades here, welders and things of that magnitude. But the value that we placed when I came out of high school on those vocational schools isn't there anymore. And I think if we can do that, it will offset some of the costs of trying to keep up with the inflation of the cost of college.
Right. Okay. We talk about vocational training, vocational jobs. The Hampton Roads area is very much of a blue collar industrial area for the most part, with all the shipyards and all the ship workers. Recently, there's been, I think, some round of layoffs for ship repair jobs in the region. That's been a hurt. Where do you? And most recently, over the weekend, the president called for taking a look at drilling offshore, and a lot of those jobs would be those very same jobs, those welders, those pipe fitters, those kinds of jobs. Where do you stand on even taking a look at offshore drilling?
One of my things, or my major thing when I'm running for office, is 100% grassroots. I know I have many supporters that are not for offshore drilling. I do believe that we can have these conversations. I apologize. We can have these conversations in some magnitude with my constituents being involved. I don't want to make any rash decisions without hearing their way in, not just the business community, but the constituents as well. Uh, I have for the campaign some very, very vocal people when it comes to offshore drilling. I'm not going to say everything's off the table, but there is a conversation to be had that if we're going to lose 1,100 jobs, which I think you're talking about referring to
Mm-hmm.
the shipyard layoff, there has to be some type of magnitude of how we're going to pay other people. I don't believe in taking food out of families' mouths and going home and looking at them and let them know and just shrugging my shoulders saying there's nothing I could have done when there is possibly some type of action that I could have done. If it be offshore drilling or something of that magnitude that my constituents will be supportive of, then that be it.
Well, one thing that the business community wants to hear is open-minded candidates who are willing to listen to both sides, take a longer view of things, not make rash decisions, as you just said. And I believe I won't put words in your mouth. The realistic probability is that you wouldn't be extracting any oil or natural gas off the coast for at least a decade, given what has to occur and given the market parameters. But just being open-minded to the possibility of at least getting the right information from seismic surveying and the like is, I think some of the business community at least wants people to have a balanced and intelligent conversation. Let's talk about healthcare now. Let's talk about healthcare. Big issue, constant back and forth. How do we get it done, and how do we control costs in healthcare?
To my knowledge, Delegate Saxman, I believe that we're losing $5 million a day for not expanding Medicaid or the healthcare program that we have right now in Virginia. I know the governor's harping on that when it comes to this is one of those partisan issues that we have to come to a conclusion about. I want to say personally, I'm disappointed that if we're not going to accept the Affordable Care Act and we're going to repeal it, I just saw something maybe 20 minutes ago that just said that the new Republicans' proposal for health care is 2 votes away from failing again. From the federal level, they have to give us something to work with. They can't do that. I think we as the state legislature need to go ahead and move forward with the option of actually really instituting or accepting some of those fees or those monies to open up healthcare. There's people running right now that I hope you'll be talking to in Virginia Beach, and I won't put them on the spot, that can't afford healthcare. We have a person running for House of Delegates that cannot afford healthcare right now. And if possible, and we allow some things to change in Richmond under the healthcare, she may be able to do that. So I want to keep it, as I said with you earlier, I want to be open to have these conversations. But some things are, I don't want to say non-starters, but some things are, I think it's common sense that we expand it. I just don't understand what the costs are as far as the negatives of Virginia moving forward with healthcare. But I'm open to have a discussion with the business leaders and business community. I understand the cost of the businesses and how they may be impacted, and that will be kind of how I piggyback into the minimum wage increase of how we connect with the small business of 25 employees or less and how we sunset it. But I don't think we can do it at the cost of the entire state not moving forward with it.
Right. Well, Republicans have said over and over again, and some Democrats have said there's some validity to the argument. I'm just going to posit this to you, is that if the federal government starts at 100% reimbursement and says it's going to drop it down to 90% reimbursement of Medicaid, you're talking funding gaps of $200 to $300 million a year, which is going to come out of education.
Right.
There's only but so many places you can actually go into and cut in the state government budget, as you know from being down there. Is there some validity in that? And I'm not trying to say they're right and you're wrong, but if we acknowledge that there are differences of opinion, and we can say, okay, but how do we overcome that? I think you start building some consensus towards getting something actually done that both sides can agree to. Is that right?
Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, you broke up after you said if we can agree to. It was like you
Well,
were muffled.
if there are certain, we don't want to get in the world of alternate facts. We've gone down that road in politics. But
Right,
if we
right,
can
right.
say, okay, you've got a point there. We don't want to raise minimum wage, but you've got a point there. You've got a point on Medicaid, and so do you. Okay, let's agree to our points, but where can we get something done that's going to benefit the most?
I
So
understand.
if Democrats acknowledge that the Republicans, they kind of got a point, they're going to have a funding gap on Medicaid. Okay, what do we do to overcome that? So what are your thoughts on overcoming something that could be a funding gap in the Medicaid model for expansion right now?
That'll be something I have to look at. I'm writing it down as you said. That's something that I'll have to look into, is the funding gap of $200 to $300 million, because
And that's been the Republicans' argument, is that that they would otherwise want to, but they're going to create this massive funding gap in the out years that they're going to have to cover from somewhere, and it could be upwards of $300 million a year. It can only come from a couple different places, K through 12 being one of them.
and that's
So
if we go from 100% to 90%, correct?
yes, and
Right.
again, with the moving target in Washington D.C., it's very difficult to do just about anything in healthcare at the state level because we don't know what they're going to do.
I agree. And if the Republicans' argument, even though I'm running the primary, is that K through 12 will be cut in any magnitude for anything, not even at the rate of 100 or $200 million, but at the rate of $5 million, I think that's a problem. One of the things I hated.
It's a problem for anyone to go home and say, "Yeah, I voted for that."
I voted for it. One of the things that I understand,
Because your opponent's going to love that in the reelect.
exactly. So I won't be. K through 12 education can't be that political football that we always have to go to and say, hey, this is the pot that we have to cut
Right.
from, especially K through 12. That's not just because it's education, because that is very important, but that's for the business community. If we don't have a strong K through 12, businesses do fail and do not succeed without a strong education system.
Right. Transportation. You're a big time lobbyist for transportation. Just kidding.
No, I'm not William Mullen. I'm not
Arm twisting, whining and dining.
I wish, man.
So you obviously you dealt with the transportation committees.
Correct.
It was a topic of interest for you on a personal level. Tell us what you see as the condition of transportation in Virginia, and what do we need to do going forward?
Well, I'm speaking from the regional aspect of being a transportation guy. One thing that I hated, Delegate Saxman, or still hates, is the toll issue that we have here in Norfolk, the Midtown, Downtown toll in Norfolk, Virginia, and Portsmouth, Virginia. I sit currently on the Governor's Toll Relief Committee, and how that's negatively impacted my region and actually impacted me of when do I go to Portsmouth and what do I go to Portsmouth for, as well as vice versa. But I do understand that our infrastructure needs to be upgraded, and in doing so, I'm not 100% against hot lanes. I kind of like the idea of hot lanes, giving people that option to travel from Norfolk, Virginia. Delegate Saxon, if you came down here now, I think we'll be in the hot lane, because getting from here where I am in Norfolk, Virginia, to Williamsburg, which is about 45 minutes to an hour, would probably take us 3 hours right now. So to have that hot lane option, but giving people the option that, hey, you don't have to get over here, or it has to be. I do know from my experience that this is an issue as far as transportation, and it has to be paid for some way. I know Senator Wagner's running right now on the gas floor tax issue in Hampton Roads, and as a public transportation guy, we advocated for that heavily. Right now, we're losing $19 to $20 million in Hampton Roads alone every year for not having a floor to the gas tax that the state has currently. So we need to get some of these things fixed. Right now, asking for a floor to the sales to gas tax in the House of Delegates on an election year is asinine. But hopefully, after all these elections are done, no matter how they go, we can get something hammered out for the Hampton Roads region, where we'll actually be getting those dollars to improve our transportation network here. Because right now, it's in dire need. I wouldn't say Northern Virginia is real bad, but now that we have construction underway on a lot of our projects here, it's kind of rough getting around 264 and 664.
Right, right. So you're supporting the gas floor tax plan of Senator Wagner. Have you talked to any Northern Virginia legislators about the impact of hot lanes, and they're expanding them to I believe 395 and south of the Beltway, a little bit more, or inside the Beltway rather. It might be good just to reflect on that and see what they've learned in the
True,
process. So
true,
just
true.
I offer that as a reflection only,
Definitely,
just
definitely.
because other areas of the state are doing it, and my time up on the Beltway is much easier in my personal view of the hot lanes.
Gotcha,
Just it helps to have third party validation and resources out there for you.
gotcha,
I also
gotcha.
would like to note to you that in past legislation that Frank Wagner has carried is that the money, and I think Senator Warner's position on offshore drilling noted this, was if we can get the money from offshore drilling dedicated to the Commonwealth going to transportation or specific projects, that
Move
makes it
to
a little
that.
bit more amenable to some people. So
Right,
there's
right.
that balance in the policy as you consider these issues. Those have been part of the history.
Gotcha.
So let's come back to minimum wage since you brought it up. And you would congratulations. So you want you want to raise it to $15.
I
Over
do.
what period of time are you looking to accomplish that, and what are you willing to take as a victory back home? Some candidates have said, a cost of living adjustment would be a first step forward. We have regional differences. I mean, $15 in Norfolk is very different than $15 in Norton, Southwest Virginia.
This is true.
Um, so, talk about those elements of Virginia's economy and how that might impact business and economic growth.
So, dealing with some of my friends are small business owners, so I want to try to tackle this thing from a small business of those being 26 employees or less, 25 employees or less, and those corporations that I call corporations 25 employees or more. I believe that in my mind, the economy changes every day. What I believe that we can get to $15 an hour in 8 years, setting a goal of 10 in 3 years, and then maybe $1 and some change per year after that, with the governors, whoever the governors at that time, discretion to monitor the inflation rate and how it goes from there. For the smaller businesses, each year will have, well, for the smaller businesses, they will have an added year for each inflation, or not inflation, but each increase of minimum wage. So let's say 3 years for corporations from the Institute of, or the passing of the bill for July 4th, 2018, just speaking hypothetically, in 2021 of that July, all corporations should be at 10.10 an hour. 2019, small businesses should be at 10.10 an hour. And then thereafter, we move up $1.22, I believe, per year for the next 4 years for corporations, and 98 cents per year for those small businesses, and getting to the $15 an hour. Now, if something happens on year 4 where we can't sustain the increase of the minimum wage, then that governor will have, he be Democrat or Republican, will have the discretion to put a halt to us increasing at that time.
So you brought up whether you can sustain the increases. What are the determining factors in whether or not we can sustain these incremental increases in minimum wage? What are the parameters?
I believe, after reading of what's going on around the country, uh, mainly watching small business growth and how small business is reacting to these increases or the demands of the minimum wage increase, being as though how many of the businesses still rely open and make profit. Of course, I believe that everyone should make a profit if you own a business. One day, I hope you do the same. But the governor will have that discretion to monitor the inflation rate, uh, as well as the employment of that state, to see how it is making an impact of raising that minimum wage. Uh, One thing that I had a question with Delegate Saxman, or for future references, I'm not opposed to Hampton Roads being a different economy than Southwest Virginia, doing sourcing. I understand that, but my question then would be with, how do we make sure that we have the proper employment and proper talent throughout the region for the Commonwealth of Virginia if we do have uh, those minimum guidelines set throughout the cities. Now, I know that the governor just vetoed a bill, if I'm not mistaken, that gave those cities to make a minimum for themselves. So I think we're already there to do something of that magnitude. I just think the state needs to make a big push of asking to do this to make the cities kind of get on board. Because I think right now the city of Norfolk, by ordinance, we can go to $15 an hour right now. I know we can't because we can't afford the budget that we have. And small businesses will definitely be impacted to go through the sunset of 10 over 3 years, based on my knowledge of what I'm doing with the Poverty Commission. So this is something I would definitely want to look into, getting into this, getting it at the state level into the House of Delegates, working with small business owners and monitoring that so that small businesses do thrive.
Okay. Regulating specific costs of business, and it's really not just businesses that are impacted by minimum wage. You mentioned it. State government would be impacted. Local governments would be impacted. There's a budgetary reality that everyone has to face.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that result at the local government, state government could result in tax increases to pay for those minimum wage increases. How do you go about paying for that?
Now, I don't want to scare all the business owners off by saying I'm pro taxes, which I'm not. But for anything that we do in the future delegates action, we do know that we have to go somewhere, and it's not going to always be K through 12. If it's a tax, if it's a fee, uh, we have to just have these tough conversations of how we're going to pay for things moving forward. If we don't even taking away minimum wage increase, we have to talk about the future of transportation, the future of education, and the rising costs for the localities. We're going to have to talk about taxes or fees in some way. If it's not election year, I understand, but this is something that we have to move forward in the future. Even with transportation, we're talking about Frank Wagner. We need to institute that floor tax, and we're going to need to have some other taxes coming in the future. Not everything has to be business stringent on business, but there are things that we need to be advocating for through taxes that are already in place. There's some things like commercial and industrial tax in Hampton Roads that we don't even utilize right now. So there are different things, or mechanisms are already in place that we need to start. I don't want to say attacking, but addressing, or at least having these conversations, delegates action, where people won't say, okay, no taxes, and turn it back. But we do need to have these type of conversations.
Right, and part of those conversations are dealing with realities in the marketplace for companies moving, growing, expanding. Capital decisions are made every day in the business world. Recent examples in Connecticut, the headquarters of General Electric moved to Boston of all places because they had a lower tax base. Massachusetts, which used to be called Taxachusetts, gained GE to the Boston area from Connecticut. And everyone has their wish lists of this, and they want this. And one of the gubernatorial candidates just came out and proposed $1 billion tax increase for his tax plan. Are you willing to at least have the conversations in the global context of like, okay, it seems to me that you are. Okay, we all want to do X, Y, and Z, but A, B, and C are our realities. Therefore, it's going to, tamp down our enthusiasm for X, Y, and Z. Are you open to those realities and being willing and able to go back to your constituents and say, we're not there yet, but we're trying?
Of course. That's with anything of working in Richmond for the last 2 or 3 years, knowing that we're advocating for the right things, and you're not going to get everything you asked for, but we need to try to move there. When we see $15 minimum wage an hour, I understand the severity of it and how we're going to get there. Of even saying that over 8 years may be a problem, but there's no reason that we can't talk and discover or try to determine how to get there. Because 725 isn't going to cut it when it comes to being a competitor across the nation.
Right, and that's what. Let's be honest. Any businessman worth his salt is willing to make the deals, but what I think they have a problem with is when things aren't viewed in the context and in total. When you look at what North Carolina's doing and South Carolina are doing for economic and business development and investing in certain areas, be it higher education, technical and training, career technical training, those kinds of things, to create the final product is really not a goal. It's more incremental and it's more massaging as you go along. In your time on the campaign trail, and it's real important for business leaders who are watching these interviews to know and sense what's going on the ground. Are people in your district that you're running in open to those? Yeah, we understand, but let's try to get better. I mean,
And one thing
in
I like
today's
about
political world is not really up for, hey, get a little sliver and go home and have a dance about it.
Delegate Saxman,
Everyone sees all or nothing.
and completely open and honest with you, I have 50,000 voters in my district, 80,000 residents. Of the doors that I've knocked on, I think, just speaking from a bipartisan effort, the concern is the media's play on our current president. And with the media and the news going around our current president, when I sit down and try to have these discussions of anything, of being incremental, let's take what we can get, is more so disappointment of what's going on now, just based off the media, not what's actually happening. And you
Right.
know that from being a
Oh yeah.
politician yourself, it really doesn't have to be anything sticking on the wall. But when it comes to business, um, and I talked about job growth and economy in Norfolk and Hampton Roads, especially the west side of Norfolk, of the region that I represent. They're pretty dialed in and knowing what they want when it comes to more jobs. When we say uh, raising the minimum wage, it seems like a thing that everyone's willing to support. I went to ODU and spoke while on the trail and talked about $15 minimum wage, and one of the students asked right away, "It's like there's no way we can get there in a year." So I had to explain even further of how we were trying to get there. And I think people are, even younger people, are becoming more realistic of what can we actually bring back home. And I'll tell any business leader or anybody that votes for me that $15 an hour will be the thing that we run on, and my campaign will be strenuous on. But I cannot come back home next year and smile in people's faces and say we have that deal done. It's going to take time, but we will get there.
Yeah, but my question to you is, I understand that, Joe, and I appreciate it. Is, are your constituents willing? And our constituents across the Commonwealth? I'm trying to ask most candidates this: do they understand those realities so that they don't look at you and go, "Oh, you're not getting the job done"? Because what you said was, "Look, I'm running for this because I can get things done, or there's good things that happen in Richmond. We just have to have a little bit of patience." I mean, are constituents these days able to embrace that and go, "Yeah, okay"?
It depends on who you ask, Delegate Saxman. If you ask me to ask a constituent who owns a business, then I believe that they'll say, okay, we can take what we can get. But if you ask me to go ask another constituent on the South Side who makes $7.25 an hour and a loaf of bread costs them $2.99, and they're just barely making ends meet, I don't think they have that that willingness to wait as another constituent would. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I represent a diverse group of people for the 89th district. So some doors I knock on are willing to hey, well, I understand, keep fighting the good fight. And then some are like, hey, man, I have to catch the bus today because I can't afford to put gas in my car to get to Chesapeake. It's a balance in that, because some want to hear it or some will respect it. And then some, you have real practical situations of livelihood going on.
Right. Last question then has come up in the gubernatorial race, and a number of the delegation, I think the entire Hampton Roads delegation, signed off on a letter supporting the Atlantic Coast Pipeline as a way to bring more natural gas and bring down ultimately energy costs to your constituents. Where do you stand on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Joe?
The entire Hampton Roads delegation, or are you talking about the entire Republican delegation?
Well, no, they're like 33 members down there. I mean, I forget. I have to take a look at the whole thing. I can send you the list if you want to take a look at it. But regardless, I know it is very bipartisan.
It is very bipartisan, and I do know that there are some people, especially in Norfolk, that are not so supportive of the pipeline. I've already heard this. This is one of the issues I've heard knocking on doors in the 89th district, and they're I don't want to say anti versus the pipeline versus what you're telling me now, Delegate Saxman. It's the first time I've heard, hey, this is a bipartisan issue. This is something that we want to move forward. When I'm knocking on the doors and hearing concerns and constituents, I have heard more so on the negative side of not wanting the pipeline or signing on to any type of pipeline compared to something that we need to support. And I have spoken to business leaders, and I might need to double back with them to see if that's something that they want to weigh in on. But for my constituents, I'm not willing to go on the record right now and say that's something I would support without further research.
Well, that's great. It's a great answer. I wish more candidates would say that. It keeps them out of trouble. But I'll send you the letter that did say, and you can see the list of all of the members of the delegation who supported it. But ultimately, as of my conversations with Virginia Natural Gas, which is down there, they had companies that had to have their gas reduced during the polar vortex because of the lack of supply. So those are some of the realities that the Hampton Roads region faces, and I'll send you more of that. Joe, it's been great talking to you, and I wish you the very best in your campaign.
Thank you,
It's a
sir.
primary June 13th.
It's a June 13th primary, 43 days. But who's counting?
Who's counting? Not me, not this guy. So why don't you give us a summation and your final pitch? First of all, what's your website?
My website is dillardfornorfolk.com. I know a lot of people say for. I don't have for. It's Dillard, Dillard, FOR, Norfolk.com. My Facebook is the same, Dillard for Norfolk. I'm pretty active. I talk to the people that are in my constituent base, not even in my constituent base. If you have a concern, even you, Delegate Saxman, that you want to hear me weigh in on from a Democratic perspective running for the 89th, yeah. I love to be engaged on social media and things like that so people will feel more engaged and feel like they're touching Richmond. If I could leave you guys with one thing, though I have some heavy endorsements from legislators throughout the region, I think that speaks to my past work, but I'm going to be running a 100% grassroots campaign. I'm going to be putting holes in my shoes. I'm going to be knocking on many doors. And I think that's what keeps me in this race. And I know Delegate Saxman can expand on it. Politics is not the best thing. It's a dirty game. But when you get to see your constituents and you can make them smile and they feel like you're really representing them, that's what's really keeping me in this race right now. And I hopefully can get through it in June 13th.
Well, thanks, Joe. And I would leave you with a note from David Brooks, New York Times columnist, who said, you might not like politics, but you sure as heck don't like the alternative. Because this is how we get things done in America. You know, politics ain't easy, but dictatorships are a whole lot worse. So let's just embrace our democratic form of Republican form of a democracy and move forward into our good day. Joe, I wish you the very best. I'll send you that letter straight away. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.